Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours podcast. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, like normal, is Mr. Ron Franklin and Mr. Jeremy Nixon, three history teachers from Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And today, we are recording this on Thursday, March 4th, 2021, and we finally get to do another live podcast. So we have students spread around the school auditorium, socially distanced and masked, but they yelled out questions to us, and we got to answer them, and it was a good discussion. We had all sorts of topics, and it was a great podcast. So with that, we hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, History After Hours podcast. It is Thursday, March 4th, and it is our live podcast.
Hey, man.
One that we have not done in a while. Something has happened to keep us from doing these. I can't remember what it is.
I can't think of it.
There was a thing I read. There's this issue. Yeah. What is it? Oh, wait. Global pandemic. How did that slip my mind? You know?
We were worried about global warming, but we had quit worrying about that for about a year.
I heard that was a hoax.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Who told you that? The pandemic's a hoax or the global warming's a hoax?
Well, I mean, I've heard both.
Both from China.
Oh, my God. Right.
Or was that a bad dream?
This whole year. Do you remember 2020? It's kind of a blur. I mean, honestly, on my board in my room, there's this date that I have that's marked. Because that's what I was telling you guys before we started. This is the one-year anniversary of when we did our last live podcast downtown at Collective Coffee, whom we really missed, by the way. But there's a date on my board because when we were asking questions that night, I think the first one out of the gate was, "Hey, what do you think about this coronavirus thing?" And we're like, "Well, not sure, you know."
It was. I think it was Abbey Pool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah. And then so we were like, "Okay, well, it's not here yet, and we don't know much about it, and we're going to keep our eye on it and hope it's not going to be too bad. But just in case, pay attention." And then a week later, they shut down school, and that's the last date that's on my board. And I kept it up there for posterity just because I wanted to remember that. I don't know why. That's a weird thing to try to remember, but I guess just out of a sense of look how long it's been, and maybe we can get past that, because that date represents quite a bit of change. I think about my life and how you have those pivotal moments where you go, well, there was this before and after me, there was this before and after life, and this is one of those things, man. You guys have lived through it too. I mean, we talk about 9/11 perhaps, but you guys, most of you have missed that. You have no idea what that's like, even though we'll talk about it. We can teach you about that, but it's not really the same as having known it. This is something that's going to carry with you, and maybe we can bring some positives out of this. Maybe we can see a world that's better in the long run because we've been through something and we know what it's like to struggle, and we know what it's like to be distanced from the loved ones that we have, and we want to get back to something more positive. So that date's going to stay up there. Like I'll probably leave it up there until I retire, honestly, which is kind of an interesting thought, I suppose. So here we are with kids in front of us and live studio audience, so to speak, here at the high school because we couldn't go downtown, so thanks to the administration for that. We are going to start taking questions unless you have something to jump in and add. I just kind of started winging it there.
All right, who's first?
Yep.
Brave soul.
Somebody break the ice. Okay, stand up.
Go for it.
If we could change the outcome of any historical event, what would it be and why? What? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay.
The problem is the further back you go, the more impact it has generally. If you change one little thing from 30 years ago, that could be way bigger now than if you change something like the virus or something more recent, for us at least.
What do you mean?
Well, like if you go back, okay. So let me explain.
Are you saying things are connected?
Yes.
There's a cause and effect?
So you can't just think, well, what's the most influential event, or let's somebody kill baby Hitler.
Why don't we narrow it down to your lifetime?
Since I've... okay, well...
A lot to choose from, I suppose. There's lots of negativity we could go. But like I said a while ago, I don't know. Like if you change things, you don't learn from things that were negative, perhaps, and you can turn those into some sort of positive. So I don't know what... That's a really tough question, realistically.
It's the same thing. We've had a question similar, except personal, like your own life. What regret do you have that you wish you could change? It's kind of the same thing. If you didn't go through it, you wouldn't have learned from it. Therefore, you'd be a different person. So once again, these events, even the negative ones like 9/11, it's hard to change it because you don't know what we do next without, we learned a lot from that. And of course, we overcorrected in a lot of ways too. So I don't know.
I would change Bush versus Gore. For me, that's where, at least for the United States, things have gone horribly awry as far as division and a sense of polarity that's just been growing and growing and growing. And for me, that's the benchmark to where the country just started coming apart. So from a selfish place, and I guess somewhat looking at it just from my perspective, which is always legal, it's there. And I know you Gov kids hear me talk about it all the time, that was the point for me where I felt everything switched in the country, mentality-wise, ideology-wise.
You don't think that was building, though, before that with the whole, Newt? Maybe we could go back. Do you guys know when I say Newt Gingrich, do you know who I'm talking about? Are you too young for that name to register with you? Okay, somebody might know it.
He's still alive.
He is. I wonder if we could go back in time and convince his mom not to name him Newt. Maybe he's just angry because of that. Maybe that's a thing.
Yeah, he nationalized politics in a way in the 90s that really started, I thought, started polarizing. Obviously, it crystallized with the election. But see, my thinking is, if Gore wins, 9/11 happens, Gore gets attached to Clinton. We've had that many years of Democrat control, and look what has happened. With Bush, he gets a pass because he just took over office when 9/11 happened. So you wonder what the backlash would be in 2004 if the Republicans had went in, swept in, and there's no Obama then. I don't know.
Well, but like you say, I mean, you don't know, though, because there's intelligence looking back that Bush ignored. What if Gore doesn't ignore it? And that's the ripple effect, right? So it's harder for us to say, here's one moment and here's how it changes. But yeah, that's always a fascinating question, though. But that's the event in my lifetime that I can, I'm cognizant of, and that I live through, and then I can see the changes going forward.
I've got a good one. Let's go back and convince the Reagan administration to take the AIDS crisis seriously.
Oh, that would be a great one.
Let's do some funding for research, shall we? What if we can not just nationalize a program to try to fight that, but maybe we can be a leadership internationally instead of mocking it and joking about, that's I don't know if you guys understand that moment or not, but that caused a lot. That's a rippling effect decision for sure.
It still has consequences today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And what's next?
All right, while we're talking, you should be thinking of the next thing you might want us to say.
There's two people here.
All right, go, front, Liam. What was the first thing you said? I missed it, I'm sorry.
Other than doing away with first past the post voting and going toward a ranked choice voting, what could we do to have more effective democracy or more people heard within the democracy?
Okay, all right, good. All right, well, I'm going to let you jump in.
You let me go?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a few things that we could do. For one, we need to stop this knee-jerk disenfranchisement that's going on. I think 40 states have legislation before it that would repeal voting rights or curb access to ballots or early voting. So I think voting as a national holiday would be a step in the right direction. I think automatic voter registration. I think you have to... I don't want to get too complicated here. I think Citizens United has to go out the door. I think you have to redo campaign finance. I think that you have to get rid of laws and rules that support the two major parties and let third parties in, because we currently have a system that keeps them down and out. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I could rattle off. I don't know how realistic any of it is.
What do you think about the bill that just passed in the House that they're going to push onto the Senate now, which has a lot of what you're, not necessarily specifically what you're talking about, but about more enfranchisement, which the GOP sort of blatantly across the board said, it's a power grab. And I laugh about that because you're angry that someone is trying to bring back power from all the power you've grabbed. Like I find that as a fascinating argument on their part. But anyway, can you spill some of that out?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it is, I know national voter registration, expanding access and to funding for voter drives, for ending gerrymandering, which is a huge thing that we absolutely need to do. What else is in there? Taking a shot at Citizens United, which is going to be hard to do with the court we have in place. But campaign finance reform, a lot of that.
I read something about like trying to get rid of dark money.
Dark money is always one of the biggest problems. And if you don't know what dark money is, it's money that flows into the system that doesn't get accounted for. We don't know who's behind it. They don't have to disclose their name. They don't have to disclose how much they're donating because they are not coordinating with a candidate or directly with a political action committee. So all this money pours into the election and we don't know who it is. And they don't have to disclose who it is because a lot of that is First Amendment protected. But we have this decision of the court that money is speech and that corporations are people, and we have these multiple decisions that have allowed money to corrupt our electoral system.
But wouldn't it be nice to know who owns your senator or congressperson?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd love to know that.
It's not us.
I've got a couple that I don't know that I heard, which is term limits for justices, and also maybe some other reapportioning senators. Instead of 2 per state across the board, you have 3 above this population and maybe 1 below this one. So, And also, my thing, if I had to pick one of all that stuff, campaign finance reform, as long as money dominates, look who we have. Look at the people we're electing. These people are not the most qualified. I mean, no matter how you scratch it, Joe Biden is not the most qualified person in our country to be president. Now, that we should have, once again, I've said it, it's like the dunk contest. There should just be one after the other candidates that are just mind-blowing. They're good speakers. They're good with foreign policy. They're experts in something. But we don't because of, you make deals, you do bargains, you get money, and it takes $1 billion to become president. So somebody like last year or 4 years, well, no, it was last year. Seems like 4 years ago when Andrew Yang came out of nowhere to run. I mean, there's a guy that's a smart dude that seems open-minded but he didn't have a shot, and everybody knew it from the very beginning because the amount of money that he would have to raise to overcome the odds. And it's the same reason that Donald Trump became president, because he had that disposable income and the favors and all that ready to roll, where it put him way above. Well,
it's almost like people vote based not on qualifications, but on like sound bites.
Yeah, that's another
Who
problem.
had the best jab? We talk about it like it's a sporting event, and even the media hypes it up that way. Round 2 of the presidential debates. No, calm down. It's not that. It doesn't need to be like gladiatorial. It needs to be logical. It needs to be reasonable. It needs to be well presented and couched in a way that they can explain exactly what they intend to do. Instead, we just wait for them to have another little sound. Oh, we ring that bell, and that was a good one. It was a good shot, boy. That's the way they talk about it. And I'm like,
the debates
is that just it's not just us. It can't just be us.
No, well, it's not us, but I mean, it is us, but it's not completely us, right? We're the ones tuning into 24-hour news networks. We're the ones online all the time, listening to the sound bites. We're clicking. We're not hearing all of it. We're hearing what we want to hear, and we share in responsibility for that because we are not informed citizens.
But don't you think that the debates are just crap? I mean, honestly, because you get up there, pay attention. You go up there and watch them have a debate, and they're not debating anything. They're just like snipping on each other. Who can get one more snap on somebody else? Crack that whip. What do you intend to do? How do you intend to lead? What are your actual plans? I'd love to have somebody actually do that. And the moderators, I mean, I remember think back to the first presidential debate. I mean, good God.
It's ridiculous, though, even the whole premise of how would you solve global warming? 30 seconds, go.
Well, right.
They're running out of time. Cut off. I mean, so they only have a soundbite they can get in.
Is that because people's attention spans can't last longer than
maybe? I mean, they floated the idea of having Trump and Biden on Joe Rogan's podcast where they could just go at it for 3 hours and just talk. But, I mean, that would devolve into something horrible, too.
Put them in the octagon.
But it would be nice to hear them talk for a moment about something instead of feeling like I got to rush something in.
Didn't they both, threaten to beat each other up at one point?
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome. I mean, just imagine those two geriatrics.
I mean, if it wasn't if it wasn't the leadership of the country at stake, it would be comical. But
I know.
Good. I mean, take that out of that context, and like 2 70-year-olds going at it. I mean, it might be kind of entertaining, but that's the politics should not be entertaining like that. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. We have very real issues that deserve real attention, and I just don't know that we've got. I don't. Maybe we're getting what we ask for. We're getting what we deserve.
I've said it so many times. The virus should have been the thing to wake us up and be like, okay, we don't need to elect somebody crazy just to demolish the system because it's so corrupt. We have these nuclear bombs, is a quote. These things happening to us, like 9/11, like the pandemic. We need serious people to deal with this, and instead of the virus bringing us together, like I always thought something like this would, alien invasion's not going to help. I don't know. I don't know what it would take for our country to actually come together at this point. Asteroid, 10 days out, maybe.
Ooh, there's an asteroid. Speaking of that, there's one that's going to do a near miss. Yeah, what were they calling it? The like the Chaos Bringer or some weird thing like that. They've labeled it something scary. That's supposed to happen.
I don't know.
Today, tomorrow? Anyway, I don't know. So yeah, since you brought that up, it's going to.
My theory is they're not going to tell us if it is anyway.
I'm swinging by.
Okay, forget my campaign finance reform. We need to deal with this asteroid. Yeah. Nothing else matters.
All right, so there you go. That's how we improve things. Get qualified people in place. That would be a good start. And then start crapping on people that have been disenfranchised for most of our country's history. Let's try to open the doors a little bit. What are we afraid of, really?
Yeah, the answer is not less people voting. It's more people voting who are educated about the issues.
Didn't Mitch McConnell actually say out loud on the Senate floor that if more people voted, that it would be a disaster for the GOP? Didn't he say something like
Trump
that?
said
Something
that
like
too.
that, yeah.
What does that tell you? Who are they actually leading this country for? One side or the other? I mean, I thought we were all in this together, really. There's no red, there's no blue. We're all purple. Come on now. I mean, really, we all sit in the middle, or we should. That's how we get to move forward. You can't just run to the edge and run to the edge. If you're driving in the gutters, you're not going to get very far, son. Like, come on. Did you have a question? I thought I saw you stand up a while ago.
Next question,
Connor.
Have you guys grown up in Arkansas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I did too, with a short stint in Oklahoma when I was not too much younger than y'all, actually, for about 5 years.
I mean, it wasn't a winter wonderland when we were kids. Like, it does seem like winter has narrowed a bit, but I mean, I remember big snowstorms, and then I remember winters where nothing happened. I don't know, memory kind of plays tricks on you, so I'm not sure how to gauge it really.
Well, but I remember being at football games and, under blankets and in big coats and hand warmers, and that's not a thing anymore. So, yeah, I mean, and, like you said, part of it is that memory plays tricks on you, so, probably selectively remembering parts of it. But to me, yes, it does seem like it's changed.
Seems like we had more snow when I was a kid. Less ice, more snow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just faulty memory on my part, but
I love it when the senators that are against global, they come in with the snowball. And see, there's no such thing as global warming. It's like
still
Jim
gets
Inhofe,
cold.
Oklahoma, walked outside, got snow, brought it to the Senate floor, and said, "Global warming isn't real."
he thought it was the most intelligent thing anyone has ever said until he figured out there's a difference between climate and weather.
Did he figure that out?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's so. I mean, was your ultimate, the root of your question based in things are changing, or like what was the premise behind that? I think the intensity of things has grown. I mean, I read a thing the other day. It's like not just the 10 hottest years were in the past 20 years or whatever. The most, like the largest hurricanes more often, 4s and 5s, were nearly unheard of when I was a child. I was born in '69, just for reference. And not that we didn't have major storms, but we didn't have them as often, and we didn't have them like back to back, and we didn't have them circulate back around. And so there seems to be, and again, is that due to increased sea levels? Possibly. The Gulf seems to be getting hotter, and that churns the storms a little bit longer. The most destructive, the most long-lasting, the most intensified, like those, like I just read the statistic, like those have happened in the past decade. Like they seem to be streamlining them. So the intensity of the weather, not just individual events,
Yeah.
And we would notice it way more if we lived on the coast. I mean, the people on the coast, and by the way, 80% of Earth's population lives on a coast. They're the ones that see the rising waters and, hey, shouldn't there be an island there? Stuff like that. And, of course, the ice caps. That's obviously been well documented.
Ask the Marshallese, who can't live on their islands anymore because they're underwater, mostly. Like, that's a recent phenomenon. Ask people in Miami who are having to move up closer, to up the shoreline because their land is actually eroding away because the water is increasing. I mean, those things are happening, and we fail to recognize that? I don't know. But again, we don't hire qualified people to do the jobs. There's no real, that's weird, right? Like the people who govern don't have to be good at governing. They just have to sound tough, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe that has to do with the fact that we have such an uneducated electorate that they just, sounds good. Check that box. I don't know. All right. Anybody else? Ooh, we got hands coming up all over this. Go right here.
So should there be a cap, like an age ceiling? Okay.
I definitely would probably be against an age limit or block, but I definitely would be for a cognitive assessment psychologically. I mean, you could...
Well, the former president had one, and he passed it with flying colors. You saw that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, did you see his doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it, man, woman,
It's like
Cameron?
Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Repeat these 5 words. I think I agree. I don't think that just setting a definite age, but it's almost like if you can't operate a motor vehicle, you shouldn't be on the road. So, some cognitive, but that would be for the betterment of everybody. If you can't function, then why are you in that position? There's nothing against you. Can you do the job that you've been hired to do? And it is true that as you age, your mental acuity atrophies, and so I would assume that they're, but that doesn't mean that you can't find aged people who are very sharp,
And
but it depends.
And there's a definite difference. I mean, older people. Some are sharp and ready to roll, and then some, nope, and they're the same age.
It's not just about age. It's about activity. It's about health, overall health, I mean, there's so many factors.
Well, I mean, we set a minimum, right, at least in the U.S., 35, but at the time that was more...
It was elderly.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Would
I
you?
think...
Okay. So opposite of what she's asking, then, would you be more inclined to lower the age requirement for, say, presidency? Or you think that 35 is still appropriate?
I haven't really thought about it that much, but I think probably 35 is still appropriate.
I still think 30. There is something about life experiences. And people can tell you stuff. You can learn a ton. You could be the smartest 18, 21-year-old. But there is something about just living life a little bit longer, a few more years, that gives you, a little bit more that you've interacted with. And 35, that's kind of, I think that's about right.
Okay, here's a point. Here's a point to go along with what you're saying, too. I don't know that it needs to be reduced because in 2005, I think it was, I read, that the words adult child became part of the dictionary. Like that wasn't a thing before 2004 or 5. And what that means, if you're not familiar with the term, is, 25, 30-year-olds still living at home, not out on their own functioning as an individual, relying on other people to help them. And there are multiple reasons why that might have occurred. But the idea that that's more common than it used to be, so much so that it needs to be defined in the dictionary, I just find that interesting. And so maybe we don't need to lower that, lower that age requirement.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I'm not sure that King Tut at 9 or 10, 11, or 12 was actually running that country.
Right.
That's something to.
And King Tut had more problems than just his age. I think he had some other issues.
Yep. All right,
But
good. Go ahead.
I do. I mean, I do see what you're getting at, because the choice between two geriatric people who both show, let's say, cognitive instability, is that kind, or am I going too far?
Oh, that was pretty nice of you to say it that way.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't pleased with it. I don't think a lot of people were pleased with it, but that's not just an age thing. That's a two-party system thing as well.
And there is something to having young people in the mix, especially in this time, because if you've seen any of these big tech companies that go in front of congressional hearings, it's embarrassing how little these congressmen know about any tech-related fields, algorithm. It's just like laughable. It's like, why are we having Mark Zuckerberg sit in front of, 60, 70-year-olds trying to explain what's happening? I mean, so there is some value to having older people, but there's also having the young people mixed in. And right now it's, if you're 55, you're one of the young ones.
But our attorney general here in Arkansas, who's running for governor, is going to help fix that, because she's proposing legislation that tells who we can and can't restrict on social media. Do you see that today?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, explain that.
Leslie Rutledge is proposing a bill that would prevent internet or social media apps from restricting certain people from using their app or blocking them, like a former president.
How does she think that's going to be legal?
It's not.
These are private companies, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And she knows that. She's running for governor. But that goes back to multiple points today.
Right.
Not sound bites, educated people running for positions of power.
And by the way, this is
understand.
What's interesting about this debate about censorship, it's on both sides. There's left or right. They're both calling for different types of censorship depending on what helps their side the most. And it's really an odd, and by the way, I have no idea where this is going to go about censoring and fake news.
But this is the Attorney General, and she understands law, I assume. Okay.
I might or might not have worked with her at some point, so I'm not going to say anything.
By the way, Trump getting kicked off of Twitter while he was still president, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Was that not the oddest, after 4 years of what we went through?
Yeah, why now?
Yeah, why
As
now?
a parent, it's like, your kids are screaming, and then all of a sudden you have that dead silence, and you're like, what's going on? And Trump leaving Twitter, I felt like, okay, I'm a little uncomfortable, because usually you knew exactly what he thought all the time, and then all of a sudden he went dark, and I don't know that I liked it, although I'm getting used to it now.
I did. I welcomed that darkness.
I
was
mean,
happy about it.
It was odd, though.
It's a nice break, but I don't know. That's a weird, and just having these policies that ban people, I don't know. I don't know.
But it's almost like, to me, if you told a publishing company that they had to publish a certain book. Like, we don't like the book, we don't agree with the book, it's our private company, if you don't like it, you can go to some other printer and maybe they'll do it for you, but I don't have to publish that for you. It's the same thing what you're talking about. I hear how many, and I'm not picking on conservatives necessarily, but they go, conservative voices are being silenced across the board. And I hear that time and time and time again, over and over and over. Conservative voices are being controlled. Conservative voices are being shut out. Conservative voices are being put. How many different times have I heard that? And how many different platforms and how many different... You have access to the internet yourself. You have access to YouTube. You have access to all these different shows that will allow you to... I mean, everybody has to allow you to speak on their platform, and that's what we're going to do now. It's like the opposite of censorship. We're going to force it on everybody. That just seems weird when you start talking about private companies being forced. And besides that, I thought half these people were libertarians and they wanted government out of their lives. Don't tell me what I can and can't say or where I can and can't say it. Well, but leave me alone as a private citizen in a private institution. I don't know. I don't know you could have it both ways.
But it also gets more complicated because then you have some YouTube. Like, no one competes with YouTube. You get kicked off of YouTube, where are you going to go? Vimeo? I mean, you just lost your whole audience. And so I get, because of the monopoly of these tech companies,
my point was that if I keep hearing it, obviously their voices haven't been silenced.
Right. But conservative voices do get silenced at a larger rate than the liberal voices. Now, you could make an argument, well, that's because they say more false stuff or more inflammatory stuff. because, once again, all these tech platforms have their terms, their agreements. But you could also look at those and say, well, if you just read, like if you look at Twitter's policies, some of the policies, the way they're written, kind of lean left.
I'm not even taking
So
a
it's
left-right.
kinda-
I'm not even taking a left-right position on that. I'm just saying if it was the other way around, and it was somebody on the left who was saying things that
Yeah.
whoever it is that's running these companies, they're like, well, we disagree with that, and I don't want you on my platform because you're saying these things, and they shut that down. I would feel the same way about that I'm saying about this. I don't care which side I'm talking about. I just don't know that you can force a private company to do things when
I agree.
when you still stand for liberty and some type of self-sovereignty, especially in
It's been
business.
politicized, but I'm kind of like you. But, I don't know. I guess there has to be some limits because they tried that. What's the one, the Twitter, not Twitter, but the other one? It's just the
Parler?
Wild Wild West. Yeah, and people just went nuts and just were
Yeah, it was-
blatantly racist and blatantly insightful and all that. It's kind of like, well, and of course then they dropped that. I don't know. This is a complicated, y'all are going to have to deal with this issue because I don't know how this gets solved. It's not like cable news in the 90s, really, because it's individualized so much.
I don't know. That's a good, wow. There's a lot to that. All right, who's next? Let me jump over to this side. We haven't been over here in a while. Yes?
Biggest threat to human civilization and why? Well, there's immediate threats and then there's more long-term threats.
Well, we talked about the asteroid.
The asteroid, yeah.
yeah.
I hope it's going to miss us. Nuclear weapons, apparently the doomsday clock, like we are more at risk for a nuclear attack now than at most of the times of the Cold War. And we don't even think about it because we don't have that.
Well, why? Why do you say that?
I don't know that.
Why is the clock ticking? What's happened? Is it because of increased tension between countries like us and China and us and Russia?
I think it's more access to nuclear weapons by non-governmental groups.
And so that would make it big. Yeah. Okay. So there are multiple nations who have the weapons, right? What is it, 9? I think. Israel's like, we're not sure if we have them or not, but they do. So they just don't admit it. North Korea now, Iran possibly. But yeah, I think that's more accurate, though. The idea that sooner or later, some like lone wolf type group, would have access to some sort of even a small detonation of a nuclear weapon. Is there such a thing as a small nuclear weapon? I don't know.
Yeah, the delivery system seems to be the big hiccup for a lot of these state-sponsored programs. But once again, a small terrorist group in the middle of nowhere gets their hands on something and it smuggles it into their country of choice.
I don't know. It seems more likely that biological weapons would be what would happen rather than a nuclear thing.
Well,
it just seems like it would be maybe easier to get.
I don't know if y'all been keeping up with the latest news on COVID, but there's some pretty good evidence that it emerged from a lab and not a bat or whatever.
Well, I thought they put that to rest, though.
That it emerged from a lab?
Yeah.
They did it as soon as it happened.
No, recently.
Oh, not that I know of.
Because
well, you might know something I haven't heard.
I thought I saw about a week or so ago, World Health Organization's been doing extra investigations there, and I thought they were like, yeah, we're sure it's pretty much not that. I think that's what I saw.
Oh, good. Well,
I do have, and some of the kids have seen it in my room. On my wall, I've got this whole, the Time wall, I got all these covers from Time magazine that are sort of inflammatory or whatever. And I saw one, and I had forgotten I had put it up there until just the other day. And it says, it's from 2017, and just blared across the front of the thing, it says, "We are not ready for the next pandemic." And I'm like, God dang, that sure was right.
And
but even though we're fighting COVID or whatever, I think it's still right. If there was something else that popped up, we have not done a great job with this.
Yeah, our brains are geared right now to thinking this is just about over, and then we're going to go back to normal. There's not much to stop another super bug from doing. Why does it have to be another 100 years like the Spanish flu?
Well, I'm not even so concerned about another bug. I'm worried about this one mutating.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You see that happening. This variant, that variant, the Southeast Chicago variant. There's all kinds of different ones that are out there now.
And you can just look at U.S. history. We're pretty soft, but they evacuated cities all the time because of
cholera.
Yellow fever, smallpox outbreak. I mean, we're pretty isolated to these, so this is a huge deal for us, but our ancestors dealt with big viruses a lot.
Yeah, and they required vaccines in states, and that was upheld by the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Ooh, interesting.
That was when would that have been?
Smallpox.
Yeah.
Well, have you heard people saying, "Don't take the vaccine because Jesus won't love you"? Have you heard those people say that kind of stuff? That's a weird one. He won't take you when the rapture happens.
I didn't hear that he won't love me.
And I'm like,
bathed in
shut
his
up, Grandma.
blood.
That's not true. Sorry, I didn't really say that. My grandma's dead.
Lady. She's bathed in his blood. That's what she said.
Listen, we're not trying to be religiously offensive. I'm just saying that's a little bit quirky to think that if the government gives you a vaccine, that that's the thing that's going to keep you from going, if there's not something already. I'm trying to offend people, but nobody seems to be taking the bait. Okay. What now?
Texas and Mississippi.
Texas and Mississippi, yeah. And then all the SpongeBob memes started popping up. Did you see that? Yeah. It's like, hey, Patrick, what am I? Stupid. No, I'm Texas. What's the difference? Yeah. For those of you that missed that meme. So what do you think about that? I mean, it's not like Texas has done a particularly good job with the pandemic preparedness or the rollout of the vaccines or whatever. I mean, don't they have one of the highest death rates in the country?
Pretty sure, yeah.
And Mississippi maybe too. I don't know.
I don't know so much about Mississippi.
I don't know. Nobody knows much about Mississippi. Sorry, Mississippi. You're just not on my radar. I've driven through it. I don't know. There's not much there. So them being open could be an issue. Like, would you go to Texas right now, knowing that is it full capacity? Restaurants and bars open up all the time.
Yes,
Yay!
it is full capacity.
Everybody's going to Six Flags. Next thing you know, I mean, so I wonder. I mean, this will be a nice litmus test. I'm glad it's them
Just
and not
let it
us in a
burn
weird way.
through.
Let them be the guinea pigs. They are a little too close to us, though, in case this does go foul. But what if the numbers start to climb? Then we'll kind of know then, right? Hasn't that been Governor Hutchinson's kind of plan anyway, to watch what the other
wait and
states are
see.
doing and then kind of peel back just a little bit, you know?
So what's the deal with California, has been under the harshest restrictions for months and months, and yet they've been horrible too?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't understand. I don't know.
No, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it could be, of course.
Is it proximity?
It could be that. You know, Texas is more spread out. We're more spread out. That could be the key factor, no matter what laws you have in place. I don't know. All right.
Well, but going back to the vaccine, though, like we've all been vaccinated now. Like that was, we were part of the group of people that, got the shot. So I'm feeling a little better. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but,
No, it's super technology. They were able to take a vaccine we already had for animals and convert it to humans in a record time.
That was impressive.
But we weren't starting from scratch. And whatever you hear, this is still super technology with no deaths. I mean, we could not have asked for a better vaccine so far. Now, once again, who knows what happens in 30 years, but I still think the vaccine, we need to support as many people getting it as possible so we can get this thing.
In 30 years, I'll be 82, and I'll be looking for the next thing that's going to get me anyway, so I'm not super worried about this.
Unless they make a vaccine for my heart to not go out.
All right. Cool. Let's see. Okay, let's jump back over. Yeah, go.
Oh, are you talking about if you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart, and if you're not conservative when you're older, you have no brain? Well, that quote is talking more about preservation of the status quo, because hopefully when you were young and you had that liberal political mental attitude, that you were able to realize the change you wanted to see, and by the time you're old, that it's now status quo. So you would inherently have a conservative mindset. So and it's a little bit different than the way it sounds, right, when you talk about it.
Well, it kind of goes along with what we were talking about earlier about age and life experience. To me, life experience means get a job, go live life. I I don't want to promote young people getting involved in politics and then making a 40-year career out of just politics. I don't think that's the answer either. I think politics should be something where you go serve for a while and then you go away and you have some fresh turnover. I think that's good for a democracy. So I do think the evolution of Trump raising up, I think that helped spark a lot of young people going, okay, what's going on here? So I think you're going to see that naturally.
Well, we've had some conversations about that, and I think even though he's an older candidate, I think Bernie Sanders is a big draw for a lot of folks. That's what I've heard anyway. Yeah, it wasn't about the age; it was what he was saying, the things he's promoting, the idea that we could have we could do a better job of utilizing the money that we are collecting and distributing that back out in better ways. We could be more fiscally responsible and be more uplifting to our population at the same time. I think that rang a lot of bells too. So yeah, I don't know.
Let me criticize my own position.
Okay.
Because I just said I want politics to be something temporary. You either get a job and live life for a while, then you go into politics and you get out. But Bernie Sanders has been in politics forever. And the criticism you hear is, what has he ever done to really, to contribute to the economy? I know he wrote a book and he's a millionaire, but like once again, he just went into politics so young and just stayed in politics. But maybe that's okay too when you have a leader who's saying some things that people need to hear. So I just kind of rethought my position on there's certain people that maybe you need that figure because he went rogue. He was always an independent. And so somebody like that who's kind of saying something that the political parties aren't saying, somebody like that might be valuable to keep into politics and to lead a movement. So I just thought I'd say that.
We talk in AP Gov about, not to get Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but it used to be a calling, not a profession, and now it's a profession, not a calling. And I don't know how you get back to that, where people are getting in politics.
They do a lot of calling, but it's usually to donors.
Yeah, they literally have to leave the building and go across the street because they can't do it on Capitol grounds, and then they call them, then they go back.
That's one thing that irritates me. You talk about getting the money out of politics. If that's your first, if that's how you're baptized into Congress, is that, hey, get off the floor where we're debating things, go make phone calls and raise money. Well, I want to talk about this. No, go raise money. Well, I have this really urgent thing that I need to help people with because I have constituents who have needs, and they don't know, go raise money. Like, what the?
And the person that raises the most gets to be committee leaders, and they get certificates and awards by the party. And I've heard some congresswoman who just got elected, and she said literally the second day she had to start making phone calls and try to get people to give her money for the party. And it's like, we just elected this person. Wow. So.
All right. Yes. We've had a little bit. Okay, so the question is about words that have been reclaimed by marginalized members of a particular group, words that can be offensive, words that have been used to persecute, words that have been used to dehumanize and demoralize. The idea about that group reclaiming that word and trying to take the stigma out of it. We were having a conversation about this in class one day. What do you think about that? Part of my argumentative position, just to be argumentative, just to make sure that that's clear again, is that words themselves have no meaning. We apply meaning to them. And so if someone says a word, if the intent behind it is not to be demeaning, is not to be demoralizing or to create a prejudicial element, is that different? Or does it not matter at all because you're not part of that group? You should never say the word because you're not part of the group. And it came up in larger conversation. It's like, well, you can't say the word. Well, I can say any word. I literally, physically can say words. I can take a breath and I can vocalize. I can say it. Now, should I? That's a different question, right? So that's when we get into the argument. What do you think? Because, like I said, we've thrown this around a little bit in class.
Yeah, I mean, my position on that is, look, words enter into the lexicon because of accepted use, and usually that's a majoritarian accepted use, and therefore it's used against a disenfranchised group or a minority, right? And so it takes context and meaning that way. And because they have the power to do that, the word takes hold and it holds that stigma. And so when a group is trying to reclaim it or take it back or take ownership of it, I do think they should be able to do that, because it's something that's been used specifically to degrade them, directed at them.
Is it counterproductive, though? Again, just for the sake of argument, I'm not saying this is my position. Is it counterproductive, though, to own a word and say, we can say it, but you can't? Doesn't that sort of drive home the point that people might be still angry at the group for whatever reason they were? I mean, I'm not saying that that's why they're angry or they misunderstand each other, but doesn't that sort of can't that add to a problematic scenario where they go, well, if you can say it, I can say it? I mean, it seems if the word is bad, then it's bad, and nobody should say it. I'm saying it sounds like it could be confusing to people who haven't thought it through.
Right. I mean, ideally, that would be it. No one would say it, and it would go the way that many words have gone and become antiquated and out of use. So
how do you take the sting out of a word that's been used to hurt people? I guess maybe that's the root of it.
Reclaiming it.
But how does that? I don't understand how.
Or letting it go.
Yeah. So that was sort of the counterpoint. Was if we just let it go, then it's gone.
Well, we talked about a lawsuit in the 1700s, I think I mentioned this to you guys. Somebody called somebody something that we don't even know what it means, but it was so offensive they got sued and it went to court because it was such a defamatory thing then. And I think, words have power, words have meaning, but at the same time, they can also lose their meaning and lose their power. I think.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get to. Like, what does it take then for that to happen?
Resocialization, because you've allowed the majority to socialize people into giving it meaning. So the only way you let that go is you can't make them stop using it. So you have to resocialize people to.
But don't you sort of continuously re-stigmatize it if you say I can say it and you can't?
No, I don't think so, because it's the process of resocialization when the community starts to say it and they're using it and eventually it catches on and then changes the meaning outwardly, then I think it starts to lose its stigma because the sting is gone. But again, the best solution would be that no one uses it, but that's not going to happen.
Right. Also, another maybe alternative that I think has happened and has evidence in history is that the group just refuses to be offended by the word. Like they're just like, and I think that has happened with words as well, and they lose their sting and their sharpness because the group in question just refuses to be a victim of that word.
Sure.
And that's something that maybe could be promoted, is have, try to show less victimhood. I mean, when I was a kid, words, and even today, you would have to do and say something horrific for me to get offended. But you could say, well, that's because you're white, or that's because you're a guy, or whatever. And that may be true. But also I think people were raised differently as well to just try to shake things off a little bit. Now there's a lot more, and of course this could be with the internet and the communication, we pay a lot more attention to words, I think. And maybe that's overall a good thing that we're finally focusing on that. But once again, if you just refuse to be offended, that also could be a remedy for some of this.
If somebody wants to be a bully and they know that the word bothers you, whether you have reclaimed it or not, I think that they might be enticed to use the word. And so then it just hangs on.
Right, but look, words not only have personal meaning, they have legal meaning too, and legal stigma that's attached and prosecuted, literally prosecuted, that coincides with that. And when you have not just majoritarian stigma, but you also have legal stigma, and you combine the two, then it creates something that's not just prejudice, it's literal systemic discrimination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not saying that I want to use words. That's not what I'm saying. I wish there was a way to figure out how to let those things go away so that we don't use hateful speech, and it's not out there, and it's not. I don't know. The whole thing boils down to I hate bullies. I hate people who have any form of speech, any type of posturing. I'm going to dominate you with words, or whether it's people being shoved around. I mean, you could be literally being bullied by, physically too. And so I mean, that's never sat well with me. My heart says that I wish we could all just figure out a way to be us and not worry about, people coming after us for whoever we choose to be.
and some of this on an individual level comes with life experience once again. I wish, some of you are in a position where you're really mature, at your age. I was not. And if somebody like bullied me or said something mean, it's kind of hurt me and it stuck with me. But one of the things I noticed with me in my 20s and especially my 30s is this social maturity that came along where I just, if somebody made fun of me for something, I owned it, And there's something kind of relaxing about that. It's just owning whatever they think your flaw is. And be like, who cares?
Let me give you a tangential example. My sister was born with cerebral palsy. And my mother was, while pregnant with her, hit by a drunk driver. And so my sister also suffered from mental disability. And I used to get in fights as a kid when I would hear people say the word retard, because I took personal offense to that. And not that they were calling that to my sister, because she wasn't, right? They weren't saying that to her, just in general. I'd be like, what the hell is it? I'd go after people. And so it's similar to that. I had to sort of understand that their ignorance was part of their problem, and if I let that affect me, it became part of my problem. And I wasn't going to change their opinion about that by going after them for that, or even trying to. I might try to go, hey man, but at the same time, if they don't understand, they don't understand, But I felt like I needed to defend her, even if she wasn't there. But I had to put a check on that, because you just can't get into fights every time somebody says something dumb, or you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's kind of like the one thing that I'm trying to pound into my daughter all the time is like, the only person you can control is yourself. The only, just don't try to control it, because she'll get frustrated because of something. And I'm like, you can't control that situation. You can only control how you react to that whole thing. And it's nearly impossible, because we have these gut reactions, like you said. But as you get older, you're able to figure that out, I think, How'd we get on? Oh, yeah, the word.
Yeah, that's a good question. All right, what time is it? Okay, yeah, some more. Way back in the back. Well, halfway in the back. Hayes, go.
Hayes.
Sorry. All right, so the question is, do we think that the Chinese style of economic approach is going to be more like what we will do in the future, or will we challenge that? Is that basically
no, I think
what you're asking, or did I miss that?
Yeah, I think what he's asking is the development of economic systems going forward. Are we moving more toward the mixed system that we've seen in China, rather than pure capitalist versus pure command? Is that it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I absolutely do think we're going to go more mixed economy. And look, do I think the U.S. is going to do that anytime soon? No, because for a multitude of reasons. The dreaded words of socialism, the curse word of communism, right? So I don't think you're going to see much movement toward America in any big way. The last big change, I would argue, would have been the Affordable Care Act, and it was the babiest of all baby steps ever. So I think, though, with the success that China has had, especially since the mid-'90s, with this system and becoming both a manufacturing powerhouse while also being able to take leaps forward in innovation and technology while maintaining this dual role.
And infrastructure.
Yeah, we're going to have to go to that. I think that multiple countries will probably follow suit. And I do think you'll see a shift more toward a mixed system, and it's going to get fuzzy.
Fuzzy how?
Yeah, that's the technical term.
Is it simply a matter of the United States adopting a more mixed economy system, or does China have some natural advantages that we just can't compete with? For instance, sometimes the religiosity of America sets limits on certain things that China doesn't really worry about. Also, our democracy keeps limits from happening on human rights that China doesn't worry about. Like, in order to move and be successful in that vein, I just don't, it seems like we have some just natural drawbacks that I don't think as a country we're going to either ever get rid of or not quickly, as far as human rights and of course their labor's pool and
You're not suggesting that we should let those things go in order to compete.
I'm not saying that. No, I'm saying even moving that direction as more of a mixed economy, is that really going to...
I would argue capitalism doesn't care about human rights.
Well, that's true. But we do have some regulations that matter in a way that China does not, like sweatshop people jumping out to commit suicide in an apple factory or whatever. And then science too. There's scientists. A lot of used to the way it worked is people from other countries came here for their higher education in colleges in Princeton and MIT, and they stayed here. Now it seems they come here for MIT and Princeton and Columbia and all that, and then they go back to their countries to do their science, and that has put us in a little bit of a behind in science and technology.
Well, I mean, leading economists in the 90s were saying there's no way China becomes a global powerhouse rivaling the United States. And here we are, and they're eating a lot of crow. And they've admitted as much. And so the question
did they just not take into consideration the fact that China doesn't care what its people thinks, and it's going to move with a ruthless efficiency in its capitalist endeavors?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is that, I think, but part of it is also that they just underestimated the willingness of American enterprise to go overseas in a free trade market.
You mean for cheaper labor?
Yeah.
They underestimated the fact that would happen?
Yeah, I don't think that when they started passing things like NAFTA, for instance, the first iteration, I don't really think they understood what impact that was going to have when it opened up markets to where American factories could easily leave, and with advancing technology, transport things all over the globe.
They didn't realize that, or they ignored that?
Well, they thought that essentially the services industry would pick up so much that it would negate it, right? The whole, this is going to get really economics, and then y'all are going to tune out. The cyclical unemployment with new technology happens, and so even in capitalism, it's the theory that you're going to have an unemployment rise when you have market conditions change and technology advance, and that you will shift, the worker will get retrained or go into a new profession, and then the market itself moves forward and recovers. But I think they underestimated the ability for American corporations to go, we don't need America.
Well, that just seems myopic.
Well, it was.
Okay.
And also we have this new wrinkle of the pandemic, the way China was able to respond and move forward, and
well, I guess because they didn't care they don't. What? Don't lock down the whole city. No, shut up. We're going to lock down the whole city. Nobody's moving, and everybody's going to get tested. I mean, they would test entire cities within just a matter of days. We didn't do that. We were still like, well, I don't know. If Johnny shows up, maybe we can test him. I mean, do we have enough swabs? Somebody get some more swabs. We didn't have a clue what we were doing, and they were like, again, ruthless efficiency. I mean, they're just going to be ahead of us if we don't find some way to compete with that. Not that we want to be ruthless, but I do want there to be efficiency. Yeah. We seem to not be able to do either one.
Okay. We might have time for one more?
Yeah. We'll get some. I thought I saw another hand a while ago.
Anything lighter?
Or did that person give up and leave? Yes. Okay. Is that the whole question? Can black people be racist?
I mean, anybody can be prejudiced. Anybody can be a bigot.
Yeah.
That's.
Where do you differentiate between that and racism?
Well, normally when we're talking about racism, it's...
Right. Well, hold on. Let me see if I can guess. Racism meaning that a group in power then proceeds to apply their prejudices against a minority group.
Yes.
And therefore it can't go the other way because a minority group can't or doesn't have power to then apply back to the majority group. Is that what you're saying? Aha. Okay. Elaborate.
That's it.
Oh.
Now, is that a...
So, yeah, with that line of thinking then, and yeah, that makes sense. But it doesn't mean that people can't be prejudiced either direction. Yeah.
So, okay, so I might be just ignorant on this. Is that how
something?
racism is technically defined? Or is...
Well,
I don't... Because I've...
Yeah, I mean, in a political science sort of way, it's prejudice plus the ability to carry out policy to discriminate.
Okay.
Ultimately.
But not just discriminating based on race, either informally or socially or... So
I'm looking at it from sort of the legal perspective like I always do. So that's that's always where my brain is. It's not as black and white, so to speak. And
well, I think that more people would understand that if they understood the terminology that we're trying to use when we say things like that. Because I've heard people say that, well, anybody can be a racist. But I think that's more about ethnocentricity and prejudices rather than, again, if you take that, what you're saying is if racism is, and you know what the other thing is? If you take that and you run with it, that proves that there is systemic racism. Because there are people in power who want to block people who are in minority groups from being in power. There you go. Or you see time and time again where a system doesn't work like it's supposed to for everybody like it says it's going to. Which, or am I wrong about that? Am I on the right track with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll always nod to you about the legal stuff.
And once again, I've tried to move the conversation in the last several years because racism, and it's a reality, but it's also very inflammatory. And then sometimes it doesn't encapsulate what we want to say. So I've been trying to change systematic racism to systematic oppression. Because
based on race, though.
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
I didn't say just necessarily. I'm saying, but in that particular context,
right? Yeah. So you can talk about systematic racism, but you need to identify the race that's being systematically. But if you say systematic, we also have a problem of systematic oppression, because there's people multicultural, multiracial.
You can even talk about, if you look at it from that perspective, you can also look at it from a socioeconomic level. Mm-hmm. Because, people who are impoverished or people who are in the lower economic levels, they have a lot of limited opportunities, and they may not be given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, especially if I think about from a jurisprudence standpoint, this guy is a poor fill in the blank from fill in the blank, and then he's accused of doing something. He might have a less chance of being looked at favorably by either the policing agencies or the courts themselves because of his background. Don't you think that happens?
Yeah.
I agree that it's race, but I don't think it's just that. It's a more widespread problem, and we need to address all of that too.
Yeah, I think it's multi-causal. But in the legal system, it is a hierarchy of scrutiny that the court goes through, and one of the things that they look at is the history. What's the history of oppression? How long has it been going on? And what kind of sucks about that, honestly, is because how long do you have to be oppressed before the court goes, oh yeah, we should do something about it?
Mm-hmm. What's the answer?
Well,
or what's the trend been?
Yeah, well, the quickest. If you
does it take the time for people to actually challenge that legality?
Well, just looking at, from Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus Board, 1896 to 1954? Am I right on those dates?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, 1896 to 1954. Yeah.
Generational. The quickest in our history has been have LGBT rights that have elevated under constitutional scrutiny faster than race. That's because in most states those relationships were criminal as in 2004. And now you move forward, decriminalization, striking down of DOMA, and then marriage equality, and then...
when was the Supreme Court decision? Was that 2004 or 5?
Which one?
Well, about marriage equality.
Marriage equality, 2015.
Oh, was it that recent?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then 2020 or 2019, where they said that LGBT people are protected under the Civil Rights Act. So that's the quickest progression that we've had.
And don't you think that was just based on simply politicians looking at poll numbers and waiting for that majority? Because it looked like, Obama was against gay marriage in 2008. Now, was he really? Probably not. But he knew it would hurt him politically, and then he wouldn't be able to become president, and then he couldn't. But once it started to swing, and we got pulled, because I remember going, wow, it's over 50%. Then you saw it, and then it started, there was change so
it's a
quick.
Momentum issue, you think, a lot of times?
Even Bill Clinton, who likes to engage in some revisionist history from time to time, said that he was against the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He was against the DOMA, both of which he signed in his administration. He said he did it to prevent a constitutional amendment. Now, look, I don't know how true that is, but the trajectory of rights, that's the quickest turnaround we've ever seen. So,
Yeah. Okay, let's end on a positive note, because
Ending oppression.
ending oppression.
That was pretty positive.
Also, it looks like, we at least see hopefully some light. If Texas doesn't screw everything up, we see some light at the end of the tunnel. It looks like we could get there. What is one thing that you haven't been able to really do in the pandemic that you're looking forward to not having to worry about the whole? I mean, I think it's going to take some time for us to get adjusted back to just not wearing a mask, to be honest, which is crazy because it just seems like yesterday we were trying to, remember to take it from the car and I forgot my mask. But can you think of one thing that you haven't been able to do freely that you...
I mean, there's nothing that I've been able to do freely, so it's all factored in. I have a granddaughter who is just over a year old, and she's only been to like 2 or 3 places in her entire life because we haven't felt her mother, and we have not felt safe enough to take her places to expose her to, and not so much that we were worried about necessarily her health, but again, with a brand new baby, you don't know exactly. But I have an aged mother; she's 77, and so what if the baby got something because we went somewhere, and you can't keep a mask on the baby, and then she brought it home and then gave it to so it's been that sort of process. It's not just about one group or me or whoever. It's like all of us together. Like we got to be able to try to protect each other, and so we haven't really gone and done anything. Like I miss just the regular interaction between people. And I get the mask, and that's been weird. It's actually a little weird to sit here, like this. But just going places and not feeling, I wonder how long that'll take for that feeling of sort of like that looming, not that I'm worried necessarily, but at the same time, it's kind of always there. Is it that? But again, like now that we had the vaccine, I feel a little bit better about that.
I don't know. I was snowed in for a week. The first day back at school, I forgot my mask. So
right.
I think it's about a week. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I miss going to the movies.
I do too.
With lots of people. Like I'm a social person.
Well, yes.
Sometimes.
Selfishly, I miss playing music at live events like this, live events where people can get together and, have a common experience. But yeah, just as a parent, seeing my children hug their grandparents, that hasn't happened in a year. And it's just, for my family, that's kind of weird because my family, my mom, she's a big hugger. And so, yeah, just getting back to that kind of, because we're social creatures.
No, it's there are better days ahead. Let's just hope that that's true.
Yes.
Let's all work for that to be true. Yeah. Let's work for it.
Wear your mask for one more, year. I hope not. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.